So today we are beginning the peasants, the workers, and the tribal movements. Now this is a bit of a long period. It will cover 1854 up to 1939. That means even before the Great Revolt or the Sepoy Mutiny or the First War of Indian Independence, 1857, it goes up to 1939. In your book, it has been somehow compressed into 3 pages, and that will just give you a shortcut or just a rough highlights. And that's a bit unfair because for a student of history, you need to understand the full picture and you need to appreciate the finer things, the small details that happen to give you a complete understanding. In history, there is always a lesson to be learned, and the mistakes or the errors or the things that happen in the past, we need to learn from it. And unfortunately, people, societies, governments, individuals, they repeat the same mistake and they hope for a different result. And hopefully, when we look at history, we will study the issues and the problems and we will learn from it. So that is what I wish that you will achieve by listening to these lectures and watching these visuals. So we'll break it up into parts, and this is the first part. Now, in India, let's look at the reasons why it happened. During the British colonial times, it's largely due to the economic policies. British economic policy was mainly a profit-making policy. They would export the raw materials to England, to the factories, when they could have easily set up factories in India itself. But they wanted to give the full benefit, the advantages to the industrial system in England. And then they would in turn import it back to their markets, including India, and sell it there at a profit. So India was losing in both directions, on the import side and on the export side, on the production as well as the consumption, as well as the distribution. And the first impact was on traditional handicrafts. India at that time, during the British colonial time, was not industrialized, and it was unrealistic that it should be industrialized. Everyone made whatever goods they had to make by hand. This included clothes, pottery, utensils, metalware. So when factory made goods, the cheaper goods came in bulk and flooded the Indian market. No one bought these traditional handicrafts anymore. And this led to a change of ownership. Or no one likes to have someone bossing over them. This is the basic nature of human relationships, of human nature. Isn't it true? Jangochon, do you like to have someone bossing over you all the time? No, you won't like to be a slave. So this change of ownership happened, where in the past Indians were their own masters and they control their own lives, including the economic side. Now they had to be dependent on the British for even their basic necessities. Now, this also led to the overcrowding of land. Since they had no means of income besides their agriculture or the handicrafts, so they were forced to borrow money, or the peasants became very, very poor. The word is impoverishment. It's a very powerful adjective, the poorest of the poor. So, this is the background, why it happens. Now, in this situation, normally people are bound to agitate and to bring up some kind of movement. And as they said, a hungry man is an angry man, and this very much applies to the peasant movements in India. In your book, it has been spelled as Pavana. Pavana is actually incorrect. It should be Pabna, Pabna. Pabna is in Bangladesh. Now, it's a district in Bangladesh. Now, at that time, when the revolt or this uprising or this movement took place, this was in 1875. Actually, it would have started in 1873. It continued up to 1876, but 1875 was the peak. Now remember that this is colonial India, and there is no India, there is no Bangladesh. The British cleverly played divide and rule. So in the Act of 1859, they somehow gave a little bit of concession to certain people who could afford to buy land. In Bengal, the main production is rice, but rice is a food crop. The cash crop is jute. So farmers who sold jute, they also earned a lot of money, and when they had money, they bought land of their own. And the British tried to give them certain right. Now this was opposed. Now this was the background. In 1873, they formed a league or an association. These peasants realized that they are being oppressed. Why should they pay tax unnecessarily? They more or less declared their independence. They were ready to fight anyone, including the government. So the British could not ignore it. In 1885, they introduced a new act called the Bengal Tenancy Act. Now, this Bengal Tenancy Act just basically gave them a little bit more of land rights. That means it recognized, in the past, it recognized only the zamindars as per the permanent settlement. Now they began to recognize other landowners also. Next point in the book goes to the Deccan. The place is actually Supe in Maharashtra. It's somewhere near Pune. Now, what happened in the Deccan? This is again the fallout of the impact on Indian agriculture. Now, in 1875, you already have the world economic system. That means you need credit to produce something, you need money. And who gives you money? The banks or the money lenders. And after producing it also, you need to market it. That's where commerce comes in. And then naturally, in a profit driven economy, you will have someone making a profit and you will have someone making a loss. So inequality will be there. And this will impact growth. The people in a competitive economy, people who are able to adapt will grow, and those who don't will fall. So let this be a lesson for you. This is a very declining situation, not just in economy, but in academics, in school. Let this be an opportunity for you to grow while others are declining. Now, the farmers, why did they decline? At that time, there was a famine and a lot of distress. And on top of that, the government did not relax any tax, and at the same time, there was no proper political force. Political parties were not yet formed. So at that time, in the Deccan, all over India, there was a sense of political powerlessness. That means you feel powerless to do anything. I keep coming back to Corona, but most of us are powerless, might as well accept it. And remember that the disease is more powerful than you. And those who make the mistake think that they are powerful, unfortunately, they end up in the hospital or somewhere else less fortunate. The British land revenue policy did not help. People or the peasants or the small peasants got a very heavy burden. Why did it burden them? Is because if they wanted money or some kind of credit, they would have to allow their land to be used to grow certain crops, which is not beneficial for them. These are labor intensive and cash intensive. That means it's expensive. He has to borrow more, and when he cannot repay, the money lenders they were very cruel to them, and they even captured their land. So it gave them a license to ruin and enslave them. So literally, the poor farmers became a slave of the money lender. This built up to the riots or the protest. It began in Supa village in Pune or Pune. The farmers, including the headmen of the village, they attacked the market of the moneylenders. Now they burned the account books and also they looted the grain shops. Now their main purpose was to destroy the records or the account books. Now this continued for 2 months and spread to over 30 villages. So you can just imagine starting in a place called Supa in Pune district villages. It spread all over the Deccan. Deccan is a big area. It would cover most of Maharashtra at the moment. This even was represented to the British Parliament. That means it was taken very, very seriously. The British Parliament passed an act, Agriculturists Relief Act, and it said the farmers could not be arrested and put in jail if they cannot pay their debts. So you could call it a victory for the peasants. Let us go now to the Punjab. Now, why did it happen in the Punjab? Again, we have very common features related to farmers or peasants. Remember, peasants are peasants everywhere, whether it is in Manipur, whether it is in Assam, whether it is in Maharashtra, in Pune, or in the Punjab. Now, here the word is rural indebtedness. That means they didn't have money and they were in debt. That means they had borrowed money and they couldn't repay it. In Punjab, however, it's a little bit different because there is something called the Punjab Land Alienation Act. But before that, let us understand what is the Punjab or the Punjab in 1900 under the British. If you look at the meaning of Punjab, it is the land of 5 rivers. You have the Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Bias, and Satluj. After 1947, this has been partitioned between India and Pakistan. For example, you will have Chandigarh, Ludhiana, Jalandhar, Amritsar in India, and then you would have Lahore, Faisalabad, Gujranwala, all this in Pakistan at the moment. But they are still geographically Punjab, land of 5 rivers. So this is the area we're talking about. A very fertile land. In geography, please look it up. Punjab is a very rich and prosperous land because, as you can see, geographically it is supported by 5 rivers. Till today, the farmers in Punjab are one of the most wealthiest, the most prosperous in India, and perhaps maybe comparable to other parts of the world. But in 1900, the Punjab Land Alienation Act created discontent and unhappiness among the elite urban classes, or the landed classes, or the people who had land and property. Now, why was that? It said that if a person died and there was no heir or no successor, the government could transfer their property to somebody else. That means the government would acquire that land and could sell it or mortgage it or give it to anybody else. In Punjab or generally in most male or patriarchal societies, this land is a very sensitive issue. Naturally, there will be problems. So this happened in Punjab as well. This was against the social conditions, the social customs, as it were, and everyone rejected it. Now, this is also counted as the beginning of the freedom movement in Punjab. Important leaders like Lala Lajpat Rai and others also took this unrest or the Punjab Land Alienation Act as a platform to begin the freedom movement in Punjab. In 1918, there was a very severe pandemic and also a famine. So people were sick and they were dying. Now, this was the second satyagraha. We cannot count Ahmedabad, the mill workers' strike, because that was an industrial dispute and Gandhi was more of a mediator. But here is satyagraha on a movement covering a big area. Kheda is in Gujarat, not very far from Ahmedabad. What happened there? The people were very much suffering because of combined effect of famine and the influenza pandemic. Vallabhbhai Patel organized a tax revolt. That means the peasants would not pay any tax. And the government response was that if you don't pay tax, we will capture or seize your property, even your cattle, that means your cows and goats and buffaloes. And we have the full power to sell it, to confiscate it, to do whatever we want with it. Now, satyagraha means non-violence also. So here the farmers, they did not resist, they did not retaliate. Whatever little money they had, they contributed to the association. At that time, it was the Gujarati Sabha. In terms of discipline and unity, it is outstanding. They were not afraid or intimidated by the British, and the British actually did that, what they threatened to do. They captured property, land, they captured the cattle. And then the thing is that once the government or the British has captured the land, the property, the cattle, they will have to resell it. And then the strange thing is that nobody is willing to buy those captured land, those captured property, the cattle. So this is remarkable in terms of discipline and unity. Maybe a few Indians who tried to buy the land or the confiscated land, they were excluded from the society, socially boycotted, socially outcast. So once again, the government has to surrender, like they did in Champaran. And they said that the tax for that year, 1918, and the next year, 1919, would be suspended. You don't have to pay tax, and the increase in the rate would be reduced. And what about the confiscated property? All the land, cattle, they would also be returned. People also work together to return the land to the rightful owners. What the history books don't tell you is the true leadership quality of people like Gandhi and Patel. In a pandemic, a very infectious disease, leaders will be very rarely seen along with the public. But here in 1918, Gandhi and Patel, they were together with the public, sharing whatever little they have with them, helping them out. Gandhi also actually got sick, he got infected, nearly died. If he had died, the history of India would be very different. So here again, when people saw these leaders working together with them, along with them, and they saw they are part of their suffering and they identify with them and they share their pain and suffering, they followed them. And this was one of the reasons why Gandhi, Patel, the grassroots leaders could find so much support. So here's a lesson for young people. Sometime in the future, you will also become leaders and lead maybe an office or a department, or maybe a district, or even the whole country. You need to identify with the people, the sufferings of the people. Again, the sequence in the book, I am not very happy because from Kheda in Gujarat, it should have gone on to Bardoli in Gujarat. That takes place in 1928. But then they have put Mopala in between Kheda and Bardoli.
The Mopala revolt of 1929 in Kerala.
1929, isn't it? And go to the next point, Bardoli in Gujarat, in which year?
1928.
Yeah, even the sequence, they got it wrong. But still, then let's not ignore the book. But then it just creates a little bit of irritation. That's what it does. So let's go to Mopala now. What happened in Mopala? And there's a lesson for you. Don't just rely on one book. Refer to many books as possible. Now, actually, in the book it says Mopala revolt, but we should refer to it as the Malabar rebellion. The book also incidentally got it wrong. 1921 is the correct year. I think this is the mistake that happens when you're in a hurry. You want to put a little bit of history here and there, put bits and pieces, let's say like a khichdi, and then you end up creating something that neither tastes good nor is useful. Now, the Malabar area, as we know, large part of it is in Kerala, but it would also cover areas of the present Karnataka. Looking at the map, you can see it's a big area where this revolt or this rebellion took place. Now, let's see what happened there. Now, in the book, it has been unfortunately, or rather in some history book, it has been portrayed as a communal issue. And yes, it was. There were unfortunate incidents and people died. The unique thing about this is that the British had to send in the army, rather, they had to send the Dorset regiment to control this rebellion. And when army comes in, they crush this rebellion. But in the process, a lot of British soldiers and officers also died. If you go to Bangalore, you will find a memorial to all the officers and the soldiers who died in the Mopala Rebellion 1921. Then, regarding this Malabar Rebellion, the book, I think, purposely doesn't give too much detail to it because, yes, it was a rebellion and there were certain terrorist or insurgent acts and a lot of violence. And even the British regiment was called in to suppress it. But what it tells you is the inequality in the land, especially. You had very rich people, very powerful people, and the poor peasants. So at some point, they were going to fight. Now, let's go back to Bardoli and then we'll close. As I told you, if I cover this whole topic today, I can, but it will take you the whole day. Kheda also in 1918, Gandhi and Patel was very successful. Now we will go to Bardoli 10 years later. At that time, remember this is 1928. Gandhi was the most powerful person in Indian politics, but Gandhi in 1928 is not interested. In 1922, remember, he had a shock, or let us say, very much of a heartbreak with the Chauri Chaura incident. The followers of the non-cooperation movement, they got so angry with the police, they attacked them, they chased them, they burned the whole police station down. Gandhi said that give me the strictest punishment. So 1922 he went to jail. 2 years later he was released. So by this time Gandhi is in his ashram, not really interested in joining politics again. But what happened in Bardoli? Earlier there was famine and there was a pandemic, but in 1925 there was a flood as well. Mind you, coastal areas including Gujarat, Orissa, and even coastal Bangladesh, they are very much prone to this natural disasters and especially cyclones and floods. Even right now, as we speak, one cyclone is on the way. It's probably hitting Bengal and Bangladesh even as we speak, and there should be some rain, heavy rain coming in maybe by today or by tomorrow. So this happened in 1925 because of floods, crop production failed, and there was a famine. Now, on top of that, the government or the administration, in that case, it is the Bombay Presidency, increased the tax again by 22%. That means it has, in effect, it means 30%. And still, in spite of appeals, they decided to go ahead. The Congress was somehow indirectly involved. They published a report and said that please consider the situation of the farmers. They cannot carry this burden. But the authorities did not consider, they did not budge. So in January of 1928, the farmers invited Patel to launch the movement, and they resolved we will not pay taxes. The book also says no tax campaign. This is true, this is correct. And they went to Gandhi. Gandhi was only insisting on one point, that is non-violence. And Patel agreed to take this responsibility, take this leadership. Gandhi also supported it by writing about it in his magazine. Remember, he had more or less not exactly retired, but somehow withdrawn from active politics. So Bardoli is important because it proved to Gandhi that Indians could achieve something without violence by following satyagraha or non-violence. So Kheda is important, but Bardoli is even more important because when Gandhi saw that Bardoli is successful and when he saw the qualities of Patel, then he decided that yes, perhaps it is time to start another movement. So in 1929, civil disobedience movement happened. Now in Bardoli, the movement was successful, but people somehow they don't give the importance that it deserved to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Now, the title of Sardar was given by the women of Bardoli. Now, women participation is something that is very unique, and peasants, women, men, everyone, they took an oath they would not pay taxes. Anyone who paid taxes would be boycotted. And they refused so many other services to the British. So this was a very detailed and a very well planned out campaign, and the person behind that was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And I think Sardar is a good term. Sardar literally means a chief or a very brave leader. Now the result was that the government had to concede. They appointed a commission called the Maxwell-Broomfield Commission, and the revenue was reduced to 6.03%. Remember, it had gone up to 30%. And on top of that, the land which was confiscated, all the land was returned. After this Bardoli Satyagraha, Patel emerged as a national leader and he showed his remarkable organizing skills. The difference in age of Gandhi and Patel was about 6 years. Nehru was about 20 years younger than Gandhi. So in a sense, you could look upon these three who really shaped the future of India, or rather the face of India. Even right now, we should be grateful to them. And why this combination was so successful? Because it worked like a proper team, more or less like a family. Let's look at some quotes of Patel and then we will close. I think Vallabhbhai Patel should get more recognition in history. Maybe one day you will clear the UPSC exam and maybe you will opt for the IPS, Indian Police Service. The Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Academy is also named after this great leader. So he said that my only desire is that India should be a good producer And no one should be hungry, shedding tears for food in the country. If you have been watching the news channel, there are so many heartbreaking pictures of people who are literally starving, don't have food to eat. At times like this, we are reminded of Patel that the basic task of not just the government, of every citizen, is to make sure that these people don't go hungry, then they don't shed tears for food. Many times we just tend to blame the government, but as citizens also, we can also do our part. He also said a war based on satyagraha is always of two kinds. One is the war we wage against injustice, and the other we fight our own weaknesses. In Bardoli, in Kheda, in other parts of the freedom struggle, naturally they are human beings, they would be afraid. They overcome all those weaknesses and they took on the British and they won. Because when you overcome your own weakness, you naturally become a stronger person. So I hope that you also learn to overcome your weaknesses. Nobody is perfect, everybody has their own weaknesses, but learn to fight it and overcome it. Because the last thing is that the negligence of few could easily send a ship to the bottom. But if it has the wholehearted cooperation of all on board, it can be safely brought to part. When India started lockdown on March 12, there were about 500 cases. Now today it has reached 1 lakh. So negligence of few could bring us down. So here is a lesson for us. Don't be negligent, but at the same time, don't be afraid. Learn to overcome your fears and weaknesses.